Welcome to Manifest Marriages, and I'm going to let Beth go with her question. I'm going to let her go first.
All right, so my question is this. I know in our marriage that we strive to adhere to the biblical foundation of structure to the marriage, where the man is the head of the house. Um, so my question would be, because we've not always, I mean, it's not always as easy as it seems. Like even in our marriage, even though we work towards it, there have been bumps in the road. So my question is, how how do men and women work together to get the marriage in the right structure where Christ is first, then the man's the head of the house, and the woman, you know what I mean. Like I don't think I'm articulating this as well as I thought I was in my mind.
No, I totally get it. You're just saying, um, how do men and women fit in the structure that the Lord's set up? A godly structure.
Yeah, like how do you encourage men to really be the head of the house and women to really submit? But where it's not, especially in this day and age where I think men are constantly being attacked as, for past sins of like past generations and things like that. And women are much more like, I am woman, hear me roar kind of, that movement that's going on in culture. And we know that, um, culture shouldn't supersede kingdom. Kingdom should supersede culture, but unfortunately, that's not the way it goes a lot of times. So, just how do we encourage men and women? Like, how do we work on it, and how, like, even when we miss it, how do we get it back on track? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
things like that.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that there's equity in the kingdom, like there's equal footing. The scriptures say in Galatians and Colossians both, where it talks about, there's no barbarian or Scythian, but one of them says there's no male or female.
Yeah.
And so there's equal access to the king and his lordship in the kingdom, but there's different functions and structure and different positions.
Mm-hmm.
And so in marriage, I think from the start, if you're single and wanting to get married, you want somebody who loves the Lord, and they don't just love Him and have been converted. They're Christians,
Mm-hmm.
but that they're submitted to Him is a big thing. Like part of that love doesn't work. It's not real unless you're doing what the Master says.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have someone who's at least at that disciplinary stage of saying, I love the Lord and I have disciplines in my life where I put Him first, there's a good chance that they're going to walk in the right position.
In the right position.
If He's first, then they'll know kind of how they stand. Now, if you're already married and someone gets saved and the other one's not saved, or all different kinds, you both get saved, but you're learning how to do this.
Yeah.
It's tricky because the temptation is for us to cross the line and get the other person in line, to get them to do what they're supposed to do. But when Paul and some of the others were ministering on this, they would say, wives, submit to your husband. They were speaking to the wife. And then they would turn, and even before that, they would say, husbands, submit to the Lord. Lay your life down for your wife as unto the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
In Ephesians, Paul talks about this. So he starts with the man and he goes to woman. So it's that part of the letter is for those people.
Mm-hmm.
So the mistake that men have made in the past has been really detrimental, has been hurtful, even traumatic at times, was that you had godly men that were living hypocritical lives.
Yeah.
Or they had areas of their life that they were struggling with, and the wives could see that, and they were being religious and saying, hey, no, you got to do what I tell you to do.
Like do as I say and not as I do.
Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely been times where we've argued, or even not even that intense, and that's come up in me, that religious, fleshly, like, just need to do this, but it is like two tips of a triangle, and the Lord is at the top. Our focus is towards Him and Lordship, and that's how it really works, because our flesh, both men and women, husbands and wives, our flesh is carnal, it's stinky, it doesn't produce anything good.
Yeah.
So it just manifests differently, but it's still the same bad stuff. So the short answer is that you have to die. In marriage, you're going to have to die. You're going to have to die for it to bear the kind of fruit that it should. You're going to have to die just for it to work. Because, or some people will say, oh, a compromise, but in the world, people come up with unusual compromises, manipulative compromises. You know, you do this, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, you do this for me. And if you're not doing that, then I stop what I'm doing. And in the kingdom, it doesn't work that way. You have to do it even if they don't do it.
Yeah.
Because it's unto the Lord, you know.
That's something I tell the kids a lot is, you know, just because your brother is not doing it, you should still do the right thing. Like, you still you're responsible for your own choices. You know, like, just because they're doing something out of order doesn't mean you get to do it and get a pass at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess it's, you know, the same way with marriages. You know, we have to both do our parts and not try to, like, make the other person do their part, especially when we're not doing our part. I think being open to talking about it too, especially, like, I know we've talked about it when it gets out of a line, like, you're not letting me, you know, be the head, or, you know, you're not really, or you know, you're not including, you know what I mean? Like, we've talked about it, and talking it through helps too, to realign, but.
Yeah, and I mean, there are invisible lines that are there, and in any position, there's boundaries, and they're not. You can't always see them, but they're there, and you don't always know if you're crossing them or not.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's like, what does it look like for a husband to lay down his life? For one couple, that may look very different than another one.
I'm glad you said that, because I was just thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I remember the 5 things the Lord gave me. And I've tried to keep up with them. Sometimes I've done terrible at them all. Sometimes out of the 5, I'll get 3 or 4. I'm doing pretty good, or 2, but then the others need work. And that's just what He helped me. And it was listening to your spouse was the main thing. It was washing them in the Word, praying with and for them. It was an intimacy, like in sex, that you gave unto them. Like, you weren't just selfish. And then the last one was to outgive, outserve, and outwork. I think was, and not in a, it was in a way of doing more around the house. Those 5 things, that's a lot.
Yeah.
You know, because sometimes you work a weird shift, or you're tired, or you feel like you need something, and you're like, oh, and it's not just a checklist. You know, you want to wash your spouse in the Word, minister to them. You think, oh, we don't pray like we used to together. So it is a journey, but it's good to start out with those. Some kind of, I call it the 5-fold ministry of a husband, you know.
I think recognizing that it's a main point of warfare too. Like, the enemy is definitely going to try to shift a couple out of alignment on all fronts, you know. Because, you know, it's like when a lion runs at the herd so that the herd will scatter, and it separates the weak one from the rest of the herd. He does that in marriage, where he's like, if I can shift the alignment, if I can get this out of alignment, then it makes the foundation weaker. So recognizing too that it is a constant place of a warfare where, I mean, it can be subtle, but the enemy really works at trying to get the alignment off. So I think also recognizing that there's something outside of just your own flesh and your own, you know, differences as people that comes against that part of your marriage that's actually actively seeking your misalignment or your, you know, disalignment, whatever the word is. So I think we have to be cognizant of that, like, so that we can pray against it, pray into it, you know, recognize the warfare when it comes. Hey, that's Satan trying to get us out of line. That's just not my husband being this way. It's a spiritual attack, you know. So
I think that's really good, being intentional about that and being aware, you know, being sensitive to the spiritual attack and warfare. Absolutely. And it kind of makes me kind of a segue in a way to the question I had, and I was going to ask you, how do you make marriage and ministry work? How does it meld together?
Um, I feel like it always goes back to saying, oh, as long as keeping God first and foremost is the center. But it really is the truth. If God is the center of both of your lives, then the flow is there. I think that alignment, it's that perfect alignment, and it allows you to maneuver in ministry together and in marriage together more seamlessly. Whenever there's an alignment off or like a spiritual attack or something that can disrupt the flow, it can interrupt, your unity, like your disunity in marriage can definitely flow over into disunity in ministry.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
I think just all of the things that we said for the previous question sort of apply to this. It's the same thing of recognizing the structure of it, communicate, make sure the Lord's the center, recognizing the warfare, and definitely following the Holy Spirit. I mean, we want to do what He's doing, what He's telling us to do, what He's showing us to do, and making sure that we're dying to our flesh and being submissive, like that He's first and foremost, that it's His show, not our show. Just all those things. And then, the knowing what you're both, I think the unity and vision of the ministry.
Yeah.
You have to have the same kind of vision.
Yeah.
I think you can't have two different visions. Like, if it's two different visions, it needs to just be two separate things. And I know we've just talked about, having that room and that separate space to have your own thing, to have your own outlet.
Yeah, your own expression. Yeah, and I would say too, thinking about that, if it's dysfunctional in the marriage, this is just what you're saying, it's definitely going to be dysfunctional in any form of ministry. But you can be doing really well in your marriage. You can have the structure down. I think positioning is the most important thing, our position with the Lord, and then what that means to each other. And then you're dealing with the soul areas, because that's spirit. Then you're dealing with personality, my mind, the way I think, my will, how emotional I am. That's a lot. You're married to a whole universe, a galaxy of another person. And then they changed, and they go through changes where they get older, and they experience different things. You have children in the mix, so you're always changing in that area. But if you can keep that position, that spiritual position, pretty close submitted to the Lord, then it helps. Yeah. You can have all of that pretty well, and then step into ministry together, and you go, whoa, there's things coming up in me
that wasn't there before.
It wasn't there before. We're having problems. I just assumed it would flow this way. Like, for instance, and I always use this example, we're musical. So let's say Beth and I are doing fine. We have a system for the kids. She and I don't, bite each other's head off. We know what this person doesn't like and what they like. And we both love the Lord, so we follow those roles. We appreciate and respect those roles. But then we're working on an album together, and I'm just assuming that she's going to say, well, you're not doing it the way I want you to do it, or I don't really feel appreciated how you're, talking to me in front of these other people. These are the bandmates. You lost respect. You've had respect for me in all these other areas, but now we're doing with these bandmates, and you're talking to me in a way that's and I don't feel like you're loving me like the Lord wouldn't say that to me. So the standard's pretty high. It's pretty high. You need the Holy Spirit through the whole thing, and He's going to be able to judge it at the end and say, you did good. Yeah, you did good. Because you can't, when you're in the fight of it, or just, He just knows best. Even when you think it's fine, even with your spouse, the Holy Spirit will say, she's really going through this. You don't know it, but this is what you're not hitting the target. You're hitting all around it, and He'll do that. And
I think, and just one thing that came up where you were saying that in my mind was that scripture where He talks about preferring one another. um, you know, having that attitude really goes a long way in ministry and in marriage, probably more than any other place in life. That mindset of, you know, I'm going to prefer my spouse over myself, or I'm going to prefer, you know, them over myself in marriage and ministry, you know, like give, and I think having that mindset really just, it's like a conductor that just allows it to flow the way it needs to flow. Um, you know, I recently I had someone ask me, like they were giving me information about something, and my response was, well, let me check with my husband first. And this was an older lady, and I said, well, I need to ask my husband first, and you know, if he says yes, then yeah, we'll do it. And if he says no, then you know, it's just gonna have to wait until, you know, he's on board with it. And her response was, you know, that's so good to hear someone say that. You know, like that it's really missing in a lot of people's marriages this day and age. And it really struck me because I'm like, I'm just, you know, want to make sure my husband and I are in agreement, you
Right.
know, not because I'm like, oh, my husband doesn't let me have anything for myself,
Right.
or, you know, like it wasn't, I mean, I was pretty sure Drew wouldn't care. Like, honestly,
Yeah.
he'd be like, sure, you go ahead and do it. But, you know, at the same time, I was like, oh, let me just ask. And I think those small acts of, let me just prefer and wait for the agreement or the unity, like, go a long, long way in both ministry and marriage.
I totally agree. And you feel really appreciated that the person says, well, this is what I'm thinking, but what do you think? Like they ask you, because we've kind of trained each other in that, because I can't think of a time in recent years where I've been like, oh, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. You know, almost with every decision I'm making, big or small, I'm going, well, let me check with Beth. And then even if I'm, you know, worship practice with other guys or scheduling, especially scheduling, because my memory's not as, Beth's memory's better than mine. And I'll say this, and she'll say, no, well, we got the thing, you forgot all about the thing. So that really helps a lot.
Yeah.
And it is mutual submission, you know, to the Lord. It's a big thing, but
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like that one aspect of it too is the one that society critiques the most and criticizes the most. Like, oh, you're going to ask your wife you're henpecked, blah, blah, blah. Or you're going to let that man tell you what to do and run all over top of you. You know, like, aren't you, you know, it's just the thing. And it's because that is where Satan wants to really attack that unity and agreement and really get you thinking more selfishly and out of that just preferring one, because you know when we know as Christians that Jesus did the ultimate sacrifice, which was lay his life down for us. And then he says that greater love has no one than he's going to lay down his life for his brother.
Yeah.
And in marriage, that's what laying down your life looks like sometimes. It's just those little, like, let me prefer my husband's, you know, opinion over my own, or like, you know, just to make sure you have the agreement and the unity. And, you know, we could go on and on and on with a million examples of that. But, so I just, you know, and those are hard things. I think, especially when it's already so out of alignment, it can be hard. And I would say in that aspect, if you feel like you're really out there and off track, is just concentrate on one thing at a time, because if you look at the whole picture of it, it can get overwhelming.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, let me just concentrate on asking my spouse first. That simple thing, like, let me just ask them first. Like that can really get the ball rolling in other ways, to where you find yourself more and more doing, you know, getting back on track and bringing in alignment with other things as well.
Yeah.
So I think that would be my first suggestion, is just pray and ask God what the one thing should be.
Right.
Like, don't just be like, oh, I think it should be this. No, like, God will show you specifically, like, no, you really need to work on, you know, holding your tongue and don't say anything in this moment. Like, it can look different for each couple, because, you know, everybody's different. It's not a one size fits all, even though it kind of is a one size fits all. Like, one word for somebody can mean exactly something different for somebody else, and it's the exact same, you know, word. So it's kind of weird how it works like that, you know?
Yeah.
But it does.
Yeah.
So.
And, you know, if it's not something that's in that soul area or communication or the things, you know, Beth's talking about, if it is something, a structure type issue, position, they usually has something to do with the heart, you know. Because communication, most of the time when she's saying, you know, you love each other, so it's a communication issue. You don't mean for it to be bad. You don't mean for it to go this way. Then that's not so much of a heart issue. But when it's positioning, you're like, why is this person's always fighting against me, or they act like they don't care about me? Then it's this issue of the heart. Like, I feel like a burden. You know, why didn't he go the extra mile? But I see him do it in other ways. You know.
Yeah.
So that's a heart issue, and that affects your position in the Lord. And but we're complicated. It's a lot to marriage. But when it's flowing, you know, you just, all those things are in line, and you're not thinking about. I'm not thinking about, oh, structurally we're like this, and then this is here. And it's just you're getting along fine, and that's how God, His wisdom works. Is that He knows it well. He knows it'll be fruitful. He knows there's peace, there's harmony. There's affection, there's love, those things come out, joy, laughter, all of that comes when it's structurally the way it should be, positionally.
Joy, especially the joy.
Yeah.
I think that is their greatest strength sometimes as a family, is just the ability to laugh and just share and be joyous together, you know?
Yeah.
It goes a long way.
I agree. Well, thank you guys. Hope this blessed you. Enjoy your Sunday. We're definitely going to enjoy ours. We're about to head in a little bit to the center and get ready. We're going to experience the presence of the Lord. And I hope you're enjoying these videos. And thank you, Beth, for being a part of these. I think we have about 2 more we'll do and close out the year. So if you think of any questions, if you see one of these, you say, well, you guys haven't talked about this yet, or I'd like to hear more about this, in the comments, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Y'all have an awesome day.